out. That's the harsh reality for half the Democratic 2020 field. Because look, what's anybody talking about? Not the folks who will be watching from home, but about the first face-off between the top three, about whether any of the candidates polling at 2% could have a breakthrough. And of course, they're talking about the first ever battle between Joe Biden and Elizabeth Warren, as her rise in the polls has some other contenders nervous. My next guest missed the debate by just one poll, and as a result, maybe missed a lot of attention. 2020 presidential candidate Tom Steyer is here. Good to see you again. Thanks for joining us.
Chris, thank you for having me.
So let's take a realistic look at this. You spent an awful lot of money. You came close, but no cigar. What needs to happen now for you to believe, and frankly, for people to believe that this campaign is viable?
Well, the rule is that we needed to be at 2% in 4 polls in the early primary states. The public polls that the DNC doesn't accept have me somewhere between 6 and 7% on average in those 4 states.
But you knew going in what the rules were. That's what the DNC would say, right?
So we just have to have some polls.
And you're going to just continue to spend money until?
What we can see, Chris, is that my message that we have a broken government, that corporations have bought the government, that we need to reestablish the democracy in order to get the kinds of policies in healthcare and education, a living wage, clean air and clean water, in order to get those policies to happen, is actually working. People believe that for the last 10 years, I've taken these corporations on and beat them. So of course I'm going to keep going. There's no question.
But what do you base that on?
They just haven't run polls.
What do you base that on?
The polls that are on the ground right now and have been on the ground for the last 6 weeks. The actual polls in the early primary states where I've been spending my time actually show that I'm somewhere between 4th and 5th place. So we can see from polls on the ground that the DNC doesn't accept that my message is working, that people are responding. So it'd be crazy not to keep going, and I'm definitely going to.
Okay, you're going to keep going. In the meantime, we heard the DNC announcing today they're going to block a virtual caucus in Iowa, that critical first caucus state. The Des Moines Register says the Iowa virtual caucus blew up. If you're not a political nerd, why should people care? What's your take on this?
Well, I think the virtual caucus was a way for people to vote who were, for some reasons, couldn't find the time to get to a caucus, which takes several hours. So that means people who are homebound, who might be seniors. It means people who have 2 jobs and can't have to be at work. It means people who can't find childcare. People estimated that if, in fact, the virtual caucus were allowed, there would be up to 1/3 more participation. So I'm absolutely in favor of the enfranchisement of Iowan voters who otherwise can't get to the polls. I think this is a terrible decision.
Do you not buy their explanation, which is they couldn't assure the security of such a system?
Look, I think there are some security issues, but I think they've had months to work on it, and I think they've got another 5 months to get that in order and get a backup system in line. So I think this is something that is doable. And when you're talking about disenfranchising 1/3 of Iowa Democrats, it seems to me it's important enough to make sure you can do it, because I believe they can.
So you think the wrong decision was made on the caucus. You're not alone in that. This week, you also ran an ad in Iowa criticizing the DNC over the debate requirements. And there's also been a lot of ongoing unhappiness about nixing the climate debate. Are you happy with the DNC and its leadership and their influence on this campaign?
Look, Chris, I'm a political outsider. For 10 years, I've been taking on corporations and beating them as an outsider in the political system. I've also started the Need to Impeach campaign, which was getting over 8 million Americans to sign a petition to impeach and remove our criminal president. In all of this, I've been pushing the system to try and be more democratic. I've started an organization to register, engage, and drive voters to the polls, which did a historic job in 2018. So as far as I'm concerned, my job over the last 10 years has been to reinvigorate democracy at the expense of corporations and political insiders. I don't see myself as being in a different position here. I'm with the people. I think every one of the stances that I've taken have been to try to reflect the fact that human beings feel shut out by this government, shut out by this political system, and that for us to reinvigorate our democracy, we're going to have to take it back. And that's what I've been trying to do, and that's what I continue to try and do.
Tom Steyer, thank you so much for coming on. Have a good holiday.
Thank you, Chris. You too.
Coming up, we're tracking hurricane.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.